Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. It is still quite early, but I do hope your morning coffee was strong enough because we are going to dig right in. War in Ukraine. Could peace be really restored soon on European soil? If so, under what conditions? In what ways are the relations between the United States and Europe, as well as between the United States and NATO, shifting under the current American administration? The war in Gaza and the unrest across the Middle East, as well as the unstable Western Balkans, just a few hundred kilometers from where we are gathered today. Our guest is the only representative of the current US administration at this year's forum, a lawyer, politician, and a diplomat. I will be your host. I'm Katja Šeruga, news director at N1 Slovenia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome US Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. So a lot has happened. This Sunday, a plane carrying European Commission President was hit by GPS interference, with Russia suspected of being behind the incident. What do your latest findings indicate? And if Russia is indeed behind this, how should we understand this in the context of efforts to bring the war to an end?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad to be here in Slovenia at the Bled conference. My good friend Andre, the permanent representative for this beautiful country, invited me to come here, and he said it would be an easy conversation about just some news of the day. But let's talk about hybrid warfare, because in my mind, this is right in the wheelhouse, right? One of the reasons that NATO is together, did come together as an alliance, the strongest alliance in the history of the planet, 32 allies that have a level of trust with each other, a level of cooperation that's really never been seen. And our adversaries, our strategic competitors, however you want to label China and Russia and North Korea and Iran and others, they can't understand an alliance. They can't understand how we work together as allies, how we can cooperate, how we can train together, fight together. It's inconceivable, because again, they're all about taking advantage and taking all they can for themselves and acting in their own self-interest and being selfish. So hybrid warfare is, again, I think a unique place where NATO, and I'm pushing NATO and our allies to really think through this and to do more to combat hybrid warfare, whether it's jamming of radio frequencies or GPS, those types of techniques, or it is interception, hacking. I mean, all of the kind of things that we see coming out of places like Russia and China. And so I can't, obviously, I know you want me to give you all the intelligence that I've been briefed on this recent incident. I can't, unfortunately. What I will tell you is this is just it appears to be another example of a country trying to take advantage of or fly below the Article 5 sort of threshold and really cause havoc. And that's what I worry about the most, and not in this instance, but in these instances generally, is just the reckless nature, the chaos causing that some of these countries want to do. And it's again, NATO needs to come up, I think, with a better strategy. I'm pushing our allies. We're going to have some discussions this fall now that everybody's back. This whole experience of summer vacation for me has been interesting, to live and work in Europe and have All of my colleagues disappear for the whole month of August. Not all of them, but many of them from time. And so getting used to that. But now that we're all back, it's September, school's in session, we're in session. This is an important matter that we need to address.
If we try to get back to the news of the day, Russia's President Putin said yesterday in Beijing that he reached understandings with US President Trump over the end of the war in Ukraine. So what can we expect next?
So President Trump is a peacemaker. He has at least 6 peace deals that he has been involved in, and as recent as hosting the Armenian and Azerbaijanis to sign their agreement to end that conflict that really has been going on for decades. President Trump and the entire team, Steve Witkoff, Secretary Rubio, and others, are trying to find an agreement between Ukraine and Russia where there will be an end to the fighting. Again, we all see the publicly available information where hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers and civilians are dying and being injured in Ukraine. And it has to end. This war's been going on over 3 years now, 3.5 years, and it needs to end. And President Trump sees this, and he is trying to mediate a resolution. But, he recently said, and it's true, it takes 2 to tango. And that means that the only way we can have an end to this war is to have both sides come together and agree. Now, I have, since you mentioned earlier when we were talking, you've watched some of my recent interviews, and so you've seen me talk about the fact that at least both sides are now talking to each other. They're exchanging prisoners of war, for example. They've exchanged bodies of the fallen. There are communications going on. Is it happening fast enough? Not as fast as all of us would like, because we'd like this war to end. And that's why, and I continue to encourage our NATO allies to stay engaged in supporting Ukraine through our, Pearl initiative, which is selling U.S. weapons to our NATO allies that are then being provided to Ukraine, or through other support. We have a whole bunch of different initiatives that have been set up, whether it's the Czech ammunition initiative and so many others as to how we can support Ukraine. But the way that we continue to have the necessary leverage for Ukraine is to continue to make them strong, to arm them, to allow them to fight the fight. And, and at the same time, continue to work on the coalition of the willing, continue to work on the things that are going to provide this leverage. That includes sanctions, that includes potential asset forfeitures, that includes continued pressure on trading partners of Russia. So there are a lot of things, and the challenge, and I go back to the recent summit we had in The Hague, and that summit, the whole purpose is, we can talk about the headline that came out, is that our allies in NATO have all agreed to spend 5% on defense and defense-related material. But really what the summit set up was this idea of Europe taking over, taking over more of the traditional defense of the European continent, and really having these countries that are rich, powerful countries with big economies to step into the rightful place of providing security in Europe and, quite frankly, globally. And that's, that we found ourselves in a situation where the peace dividend had been taken for too long, that countries like Germany were dramatically underspending on their own defense, and therefore the collective defense. And so I reminded everyone, when they mentioned Article 5 and how important that guarantee and how ironclad it was, and wanted me to, sort of affirm Article 5, I would remind them that the treaty has more than just one article. It has Article 3, which all allies agree to provide for their individual defense and therefore the collective defense. And so, you can't have one without the other. It is, and that is what I think happened at the summit. I think Europeans and Canada stepped in and said, okay, we're going to do more. We're going to equalize. We're going to partner. And this is going to be a true alliance. This isn't going to be a dependency on the United States to come in and solve all of our problems. This is going to be a true joint venture, a true agreement among allies. And and then the question would always be, well, what happens when a European country or Europeans or Canadians or any other NATO ally wants more responsibility or more say in NATO? I was like, fantastic, fantastic. I would love the day when one of these countries comes and says, we think we're ready to provide, something that only right now the United States can provide. That'd be fantastic. That means that our mission has been accomplished.
A lot of countries struggled, actually, after the NATO summit in The Hague. Slovenia was among them due to the 5% target. They had some difficulties explaining at home such an increase in defense spending. But the alliance will review the spending of its members in 2029, I think, when Donald Trump is no longer in the White House. And this is exactly what those countries who struggle at home are actually counting on. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's too bad.
Okay.
So, I'll expand. I remember one of our great allies talking about that this 5% commitment was pushing the envelope, was sort of at the sort of as far as we can get this and maybe too far. And we have to step back. We have to think about the history of this continent and the history of these countries and the purpose of NATO. The purpose of NATO is, one, to keep the United States engaged in European security and the architecture. But at the same time, it is to make sure that we're all part of an alliance, we're all allies, so that we don't fight among each other and try to take advantage of disagreements on borders or whatever the situation might be. Because again, World War I and World War II were so catastrophic. And now we find ourselves, quite frankly, in the middle of another war, traditional war on the European continent.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't involve NATO territory, but it has the equal and dramatic effects that other wars have had. It's had migration challenges. It is certainly affected economies. It has disrupted supply chains and agricultural production and all of the classic challenges that war presents.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine...
You don't like the way I'm filibustering you, do you?
No, at all.
She's going to start getting that tough reporter questions now. Start asking me yes/no questions, right?
Meanwhile, Ambassador, in Ukraine, the fighting continues also after the summit in Alaska. On Thursday, we saw a very deadly Russian attack, killing, according to Ukrainian authorities, at least 25 people, including 4 children. Why hasn't the United States called for an immediate ceasefire after such an attack, barely 2 weeks after Alaska? And why did, in your opinion, the US president choose to stay silent?
I think the United States has been very clear we want this war to end. We want the fighting to stop. I think it's a very, I'm going to say naive to believe that the United States can decree that the fighting stop and that somehow Russia or Ukraine or that either side will stop the fighting. And there is not the elephant in the room is that there's not the political will among our allies to do what it takes to stop this war.
Which allies?
All allies, all 32 NATO allies. There is a lot more that could be done. There's a lot more that could be done.
Be more specific.
Well, Europe could put troops in. But nobody's willing to do that. And guess what? They always want this is my frustration with where we find ourselves. We are back. The summit was successful. We all patted ourselves on the back. All NATO allies agreed to spend 5% in the next decade, primarily on 3.5% on true defense, military, but the other 1.5% on critical defense-related mobility, infrastructure, cybersecurity, again, the things that will make the alliance strong. But then that's on the one hand, and we all say, well, okay, everybody, Europe's stepping up. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, okay, United States, what are you going to do? The United States makes about 53%, 54% of the NATO alliance. So there's 31 other allies that are essentially equal, that could have an equal voice. And that's where I think if we continue to work together, and these I want to make sure, like, we condemn these attacks on civilians. These are outrageous. You don't send missiles and drones into cities and kill children and hit hospitals. I mean, that is not the modern world that we have all signed up for. But at the same time, that's where we find ourselves. And expecting the United States to solve this alone is just, I just don't think it's not fair. It's not the world we find ourselves in. And again, Europe has agreed to accept more responsibility for Europe. And so Europe should find and continue to work for mechanisms that equally put the leverage on both combatants, but especially Russia, to settle and resolve this war.
So while the meeting between the Ukrainian and Russian presidents is, at least at this moment, still not in sight, the blame game continues. Exactly, could you be more specific when you talk about European efforts to put their forces or to send their forces to Ukraine?
Europe is holding over 200 billion euros of assets that they're unwilling to seize. That's one example. And again, it seems like every time I mention something like this, it's just sort of, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, we won't do that, Matt. Okay, well, you could. I mean, that comes with great risk. But everybody expects the United States to take these great risks and ignore sort of the other. I mean, we're all going to have to continue to leverage and to find ways to get to a peace deal. And obviously, we're not there yet, or it would happen. And again, the United States put a 50% tariff on India. That 50% tariff went into effect and is dramatically changing India's behavior as it relates to buying oil and gas from Russia.
Are you considering putting similar measures also to restrict Russia's trade with China?
I mean, that negotiation is ongoing on all of our trading relationship with China, and it is certainly part of that discussion. But you just saw, I saw the pictures, and you mentioned the statement of Putin that came out of a meeting of India, China, and Russia. Yes. I mean, it is very much a group that is trying to organize themselves and counter, what we have built in the West. I think that's good because I think we represent the values that are better, that are freedom, opportunity, a flourishing citizenry. So I think we offer better than what is forming on the other side. But we cannot ignore that those folks that want to continue the war, specifically China, India, and the combatant Russia, I mean, that they are organizing themselves to try to avoid the impacts of this war.
Well, you said many times, and so did the other members of the administration, that the strategy is to stop the killing and to end the war. But to be a little bit more specific, U.S. Vice President Vance recently said that U.S. wants to protect Ukraine's territorial integrity. What does that mean exactly, Ambassador?
Well, I can't speak for J.D. Vance, and so J.D. Vance is is going to have to cover his own comments. What I would say is that certainly I believe it has been articulated from the highest levels of the federal government that the United States wants Ukraine to continue as a independent country that has democratic elections and provides for itself. And obviously, Ukraine continues to want to be part of Europe. They want to be part of the EU. They want to be part of NATO. And so that's one of the issues that are currently on the table that we read about in the negotiations to resolve this war. But Russia doesn't want to end the fighting. And so I go back to where I started, which is we need to continue, especially our European allies need to continue to lean in and make sure that Ukraine can defend itself and be given the space to, do what they're doing, which is to develop deeper strike capabilities. They have just started using a new missile, which again changes the calculation. If you can fire a missile 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers into Russia, that's a different opportunity to defend themselves than maybe what they had previously.
But to be a little bit more specific, what is the strategy to help Ukraine achieve victory, to preserve as much Ukrainian territory as possible, to persuade Ukraine to cede occupied territories to Russia and how much of its territory, or to prevent a total defeat?
Well, Katja, there's no victory for either side, unfortunately. The killing needs to end. President Trump has been very clear about this, that this death, destruction, just absolute obliteration that is happening every single day on the battlefield needs to end. It is unconscionable that for 3.5 years this has gone on, that over 1 million soldiers have died on the battlefield. Obviously, the resolution is none of what you just said. It's a negotiated end to the fighting. And we're in the United States of America. President Trump is investing a lot of time, effort in trying to resolve this conflict.
So if Ukraine were to cede part of its territory, it would likely do so in exchange for strong, or maybe even exceptionally strong, guarantees from the West. You spoke a little bit earlier about what the US is expecting from Europe, but when it comes to American boots on the ground, that's a definite no.
Well, President Trump has said there won't be an American boots on the ground.
Could you confirm that the United States would deploy American private military firms to Ukraine? And if you can...
I can't confirm anything like that. So here's the thing. We are in the middle of negotiating this. Ukraine is going to have to agree to anything that comes about from an end to the fighting. So is Russia. They're going to both have to agree. And what the security framework looks like and who participates, I think is still an ongoing discussion and negotiation. I'm actually encouraged by the coalition of the willing, and what I'm hearing sort of is being proposed by our NATO allies, and it's much broader than our NATO allies. I think there's almost 50 countries that are participating in the coalition of the willing that would ultimately be the main part of the security guarantee. So, but I think it's premature to say what is or what is in any security guarantees, and I have nothing to comment about private security firms or who would participate in that.
Okay. Among the leaders who maintain good relations with Russia and China are also Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and President of Republika Srpska Milorad Dodik. In Serbia, the protests have recently turned increasingly violent. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, Milorad Dodik is not complying with the court's decision. What is your risk assessment showing, and how does the United States see these two leaders? As stability factors in the Western Balkans or as a liability?
Well, first we need stability. I mean, as we're sitting here today in a country that straddles, sort of Central Europe and the Western Balkans. We know that the Western Balkans have had, kind of, especially since the dissolution of Yugoslavia, what has happened with, the wars and the ethnic conflict. And so certainly the United States wants stability in the Western Balkans. We've invested a lot of time and effort in the Western Balkans. Slovenia obviously has invested a lot of time and effort and boots on the ground as part of KFOR. And so, we're paying very close attention to everything that's going on in both Republic Srpska and Serbia. But, right now, we're just making sure that it doesn't sort of turn into a potential regional conflict. And at the same time, this is another place where we're trying to ensure that our European allies in NATO are ready, willing, and able to provide any security forces or political pressure to make sure that we can kind of keep stability in the Western Balkans.
According to some media reports in the Western Balkans, Vučić and Dodik are making strong efforts to secure a meeting with US President Trump. Vučić has actually already tried once. In May this year, he was in Florida, seeking to arrange a meeting with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Do you believe that President Trump would receive them, will receive them, and give them the support they are seeking to remain in power?
I really have nothing to add to that. I think President Trump really has a unique ability to talk to people, to pick up the phone, to have conversations, to talk to world leaders, and to use the influence of the presidency of the United States and the power of the United States of America to advance the interests of peace, democracy, stability, and an economic opportunity. And if President Trump determines that there is a reason to meet with either of those leaders, then I'm sure he would take a meeting. But at the same time, I think he is clear-eyed, because again, he has a really deep understanding of how all of these issues and leaders fit together in the broader picture. And so I think, if he does that, then I think he believes that there's an opportunity to advance, that agenda that I mentioned. But he's certainly not going to take a meeting to try to help a leader strengthen their political position. That is not, what President Trump does. He is a deal maker. He's a peacemaker. And so if there's an opportunity to advance U.S. values and interests, then he might take a meeting. But I'm certainly not here to announce any pending meetings with the Serbian leader or the Republic Srpska leader.
Do you think that NATO would intervene if the political crisis were to escalate into an armed conflict, especially in Bosnia at the moment, but also in Serbia?
Ultimately, that's up for all 32 allies. We work on a unanimity basis. I think we're a long way from anything like that. Obviously, U4, is on, has troops there, and I think we would continue to encourage all sides to work consistently with the Dayton Accords. I was in Dayton this year, celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Accords, and I just think there is a framework there to resolve disagreements and to kind of encourage peace, and that's what we should always work towards. Whether NATO is going to be involved, there's rule number one of politics is don't answer sort of hypotheticals. So I think we'll just have to see how these develop. And one of the things that I know about the world and conflict and history is that whatever you expect is going to happen, usually the opposite happens. So we'll just, again, NATO is stronger now than it's ever been. It is more focused than it's ever been. And I think that is good for Europe. That is good for the North Atlantic. And it should be very concerning to our adversaries.
Back in 1999, due to the war in Kosovo and ethnic cleansing, NATO bombed Serbia for 11 weeks. US was fully on board. In light of those events, how does, in your assessment, the US position appears today when it comes to the war in Gaza, where IPC has declared famine, which means that at least 30% children suffer from acute malnutrition, and the world's genocidal activities and even genocide are also being used on a high political level in Europe?
What's the question?
How do you think, in light of those events, the US position today appears today when it comes to the war in Gaza?
Well, again, President Trump and Special Envoy Witkoff are fully engaged in trying to resolve that conflict. As I've said many times, there's one side that could resolve this immediately, and that is Hamas. If Hamas said, we surrender, we're no longer fighting, and the people in Gaza would immediately be better off than they are now. The destruction and the death and the images we're seeing are heartbreaking, and at the same time that this is all being caused by Hamas and the fallout from their October 7th unprovoked attack on Israel, where over 1,000 Israelis died. So, I think President Trump is working with both sides. Steve Witkoff is working with both sides. My friend Ambassador Huckabee is certainly fully engaged, and we're just going to have to let it work. But again, Hamas is the one that could end this immediately, and the people of Gaza are suffering because of Hamas. And I just don't think we can, morally equate both sides as somehow being equal in their responsibility for what the suffering is happening. It's I am the ambassador to NATO, and so I'm a little far afield talking about the Middle East, and there are better voices than me that could probably get a deeper explanation of what our plan and what our policy is. But I would just say that right now this is another place where the reason that we're seeing fighting continue in Gaza and in Gaza City, for example, is because Hamas is continuing to fight.
But at the same time, the Israeli offensive has not achieved its key objectives: to defeat Hamas and to secure the return of all the Israeli hostages. In months the war is going on, these key objectives are still not achieved. And if Donald Trump, as you said earlier, is actually the only one who can bring peace to Ukraine, that he's most certainly the only one.
Did I say that?
Many times before.
The only one? I think okay. I mean, I think it's a little more nuanced, but so I want to explain that.
Please do.
Yeah, so Donald Trump is uniquely in a position to bring both sides of the table.
Okay.
I don't think, Donald Trump can't declare peace in Ukraine. It's going to take both sides to come together and with an agreement. And Ukraine's going to have to agree to whatever the situation is, and Russia's going to have to agree to whatever the situation. We're not there yet. But he is uniquely has the ability. He's the only one that can bring them to the table. He's the only one that brought Putin to the table. He's the only one that can continue to keep him at the table.
So to be more accurate, the only one who can help to end the war. But he's certainly the only one then, most certainly, who can influence Israeli Prime Minister. What is the American administration doing in this regard? Namely, calls for President Trump to help to put an end to war in Gaza are already loud on the streets of Israel, and they are coming from the families of Israeli hostages taken by Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, again, President Trump wants this conflict to end. And, he has had a lot of conversations with the Israelis, and we've had conversations at all levels, and we've had conversations with the folks, from Hamas, and we've talked to interlocutors from the Middle East. And, again, this is another situation where, ultimately both sides are going to have to resolve this. It's horrific, and in a modern world, it is a little bit surprising that we still have just these situations where, for whatever reason, political gain, territorial ambitions, or whatever, where you just end up in these intractable things. But I don't see the conflict in Ukraine as the same as the Gaza situation. The Gaza situation is you have essentially a terrorist organization in Hamas that is continuing to hide behind civilians, exploit civilians, hide in hospitals, have tunnels. I mean, it is like no organization that we can have that's a proxy of Iran, which is kind of brings their own complexions to it. I just at the end of the day, Hamas is the one that is going to decide how long they want the people of Gaza to suffer. The Israelis have and should have the ability to defend themselves. We could. Everyone knows that if there was not Hamas shooting and causing chaos at these aid points in the distribution of aid, that this would be a very orderly situation. But Hamas chooses to cause the chaos, and therefore they're choosing, by extension, to cause the suffering of the people of Gaza.
Mm-hmm. According to recent media reports, the US is now denying visas for almost all applicants who use Palestinian passport. Can you confirm that, and what's the end game here?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I can't confirm or deny that that's happening. And again, I'm one of the nice things of being the U.S. ambassador to NATO is I don't have a consular service, so I don't even have to worry about that.
Based on recent media reports, furthermore, there is allegedly a proposal on the table under which the US assumes control over Gaza for 10 years, and at the same time, Palestinians who leave Gaza and relocate receive $5,000 each. Could you clarify this?
I'm not going to comment on media reports that are not verified by the United States, and it does not sound to me like a serious proposal, but I don't have any. I'm not involved in any peace negotiations regarding Gaza, so I don't have anything to add. But I would. I think Abraham Lincoln said it best. He said, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet."
Okay. The State Department and the White House indeed didn't comment on this, but it was President Trump himself some time ago who was talking about Gaza becoming the Riviera of the Middle East, and just recently he met with Jared Kushner and ex-British PM Tony Blair in the White House, so that's probably why this report.
Yeah, and listen, I think it captures something that we should all be thinking about as sort of a world of peacemakers, and that is that the potential for Gaza is quite extraordinary, and what Hamas has sort of allowed to happen or caused in Gaza, I mean, it's a shame. I mean, it should be a beautiful place on the Mediterranean, and it's not. And so I certainly think President Trump sees the potential for it, and I mean, again, I think that's his eye for real estate is obviously very good. Just look what he's done with the White House. I mean, it's been it's really been quite enlightened with the gold accoutrement that he has added. So that being said, I don't have anything to add to sort of unsubstantiated news reports.
Also, NATO concern was that the conflict in the Middle East might escalate further. The US intervened and bombed Iran nuclear facilities. What developments can be anticipated in the period ahead in that sense?
The United States, will continue to be a great friend and a great ally. Iran was told that we had a red line, that you would not develop nuclear weapons. That red line hasn't changed. We took action to ensure that Iran would not possess a nuclear weapon that would destabilize dramatically the Middle East. It would cause a nuclear escalation that no one wants to see. And so, President Trump took decisive action, ended the 12-day war, demonstrated U.S. military capabilities that only the United States of America can provide by flying B-2 bombers from just south of my home state of Iowa, from Kansas City, all the way halfway around the world, dropping precision munitions, and then returning home and having dinner with their families. I think, it's just, without being detected. Did I mention that? So we have exquisite, unique capabilities, and we will continue to deploy those when it's in the U.S. interest and again, in our allies' interests. And that's why I encourage all 31 other NATO allies to join us in the modernization of our defense capabilities, to continue to increase their defense and defense-related spending, because it's important. We have to have a strong alliance so that it's credible, and that strength is going to ensure peace.
And to be clear, encouraging them to buy American arms.
Yes, but, first of all, the United States of America makes some pretty amazing weapon systems, and because we've had these ongoing wars, we have seen, quite frankly, some of these air defense systems be deployed, and we know their percentage of success. And so there's a reason that people want Patriot missile systems. It's because they're the best, and they happen to be manufactured in the United States by a United States of America company. But at the same time, we need all the defense industrial base, both in the United States and in Europe, to rise, to increase production. We need co-production agreements. We need to look for innovation and opportunities in places like Slovenia, where we can create jobs in Slovenia making, defense articles. It's that simple. We have a long way to go. I am certain we are the strongest alliance in the history of the planet, but we could be a lot stronger.
Last but not least, the Slovenian and the US positions on the war in Gaza could hardly be further apart. Does this in any way affect Slovenian-American relations?
It does not. We have a great relationship bilaterally with Slovenia. Certainly, the United States of America, we're paying very close attention to all of these matters, and we're also paying attention to what our allies and what their public opinion is. But at the same time, we have to end the killing, end the death, end the destruction. And that's what President Trump is clearly focused on both in the Ukrainian conflict and in the situation in Gaza. We came in last night, had a chance to talk to several of our friends and allies here in Slovenia. I'll have more meetings today. I'm sure that's on their mind. But I just want to reemphasize just one thing and be clear. I'm the U.S. ambassador to NATO. And so, I have broad shoulders as a former college football player. I can accept a lot of the criticism. At the same time, I'm responsible for making sure that NATO is strong and continues to be stronger. I have no policy responsibility for what we're doing or who we're supporting in the Israel-Hamas conflict. But at the same time, I do support President Trump. I have supported President Trump for a long time, and I will continue to, defend his policies, because again, I think they're the right policies.
So
we got plenty of time.
We shall see how the things will unfold. We all hope it will be in the direction of peace. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for today's conversation, and I hope you will also be able to enjoy beautiful Bled a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.